I am very honored to be with Professor Yossi Sheffi, Professor of Engineering at MIT. He is the director of the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics, and he is the author of a new book, The New Abnormal: Reshaping Business and Supply Chain Strategy Beyond COVID-19. I'm just thank you so much for coming on the show. I think it's just a super relevant, important thing we have to explore right now. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me, Noah.
Yeah. Um, so just to start out, I want to get, let's just get to the real basics, and then I'm gonna um, get a quick get a quick story on you. But let's just take it from square one. How do you define supply chain?
Supply chain is a series of activities that take place from the earliest form of a product, going through from mining or agriculture, basic material that come from the earth, to a finished product, to a series of supplier, transportation, carriers, custom brokers, what have you, going through the world, shipping and making and shipping chain until it gets to a retail store, gets to the consumer, and actually all the way back to, responsibly getting rid of it.
I like that. Yeah, that is um, the final stage of everything, isn't it?
Yep.
So now you are, one of the foremost supply chain experts in the world. How did you get there? Give me the 3 minute life story to get to where you are. What do you know that and that you've gathered from all of your experiences? You're from Israel. Um, you studied engineering, which is, a lot of our listeners are engineers. So I mean, you're on their level. What give me the real quick version.
Okay, so I studied just civil engineering at the Technion in Israel, came to MIT, and there I started studying operation research, which is basically applied mathematics, and did a lot of work in network theory. Originally, I applied it to urban transportation planning and transits and people transportation, but that was pretty frustrating because I realized that nobody was applying what I thought were brilliant ideas. It's all government, so nobody was using it. So I had an opportunity. I started working with trucking companies using basically the same math, of course, different application, but the same mathematical principles. And lo and behold, it saved money and they started using it, which was very satisfying. From there, I moved to the customers of the trucking company, to the manufacturers, to the retailers, to the distributors, and optimizing their operations. In the process, I started 5 companies, all were
5
successful.
companies.
Yeah, all were successful, always sold to bigger companies. Always came back to MIT because I actually like teaching and research. But every time I took a year off, started a company, installed management, and went back to MIT. All the companies were acquired by larger companies. And
I love that. You're just like, yeah, started 5 companies and, kept going back, and that's just incredible to me. Like, to me, to start one company is you must be very organized. You must be very.
I would say that the secret is to have a very understanding wife, which after 5 companies, she stopped being understanding. And she said, it's one more company or me. So the 5th company was, when I sold it, was the last one.
Do you have
Because
children?
I have 2 children, 1 grandchild, yes.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I have good, as I said, when I'm not joking. I would say this about my wife because I could have ruined my relationship with children. I work like an idiot. I mean, work basically 24/7, and you know, because my wife the kept the relationship going, I could have family life, and my children till now don't hate me. So it's a big achievement.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've written several books
Yeah.
and all about the supply chain.
All about different aspects of supply chains. From two of my books were on risk management and resilience, but one was on the structure of supply chain, was called cluster. Why places like Memphis, places like Louisville, places like LA, Atlanta have lots of logistics companies on top of each other. Why companies are attracted to their competitors. And there's a whole theory behind it of clustering and concentration. I wrote a book on supply and on sustainability in supply chain. And if I can go into the story of the latest book, just mention it. So every 4 or 5 years I write a book. I have 30 people involved in it, students, postdocs, research associates. And I was into one of those in March 2020. I was on a book on innovations, on how blockchain and lots of other things will or will not change supply chains. So I
I was
start
going
with
to ask you about that because I'm really interested in blockchain and crypto. So yeah, later if we have time, I was going to ask you about that. So,
Okay.
anyways, you're
So
you're
talk about
you're researching with some students, and then all of a sudden something unexpected happened.
yeah, COVID happened, and I realized that in some sense, the biggest impact on supply chain in my lifetime. So I just stopped the whole thing, stopped the process, stayed with only 2 research associates, helped me organize the material. And since the middle of March until the beginning of August, I basically slept 4 hours a night. That's 24/7 work. And by then, my children are out of they're not
Yeah.
at home anymore. So it was easier. Also, the fact that I didn't have to commute, I didn't have to go to work, so I had more time and wrote this book. And then, and this book was very strange because it's like writing a history book while history is still unfolding.
It's awesome.
So sometimes I had to change stuff because things didn't happen the way I thought they'll happen. So in June or so, I started talking to publishers, and they say, yeah, I don't know if you know it, Noam, but it takes a year from the time you submit a manuscript until the publisher puts it out. So I talked to several of them and said, that's ridiculous. A year from now, nobody will remember, nobody will know how to spell COVID, or so I hope at least.
Or they won't want to hear about it.
For sure they don't want to hear about it. So I ended up, to make a long story short, I ended up self-publishing. I was talking to one of the CEO of one of these publishers, and I told him, talking to you is like talking to a travel agent before Expedia, because you do it in a year, Amazon does it in 48 hours. I mean, how can you even dream about competing?
Talk about supply chain.
Talk about supply chain. They do it in 4. Now it takes you 2 weeks because it was my first time, so 2 or 3 weeks to organize the material. It's a mistake, to get my own ISBN number, to do all the things that the publisher is doing. But basically now I know how to do it in 48 hours.
And you think that, would you ever go back the other way? I mean, don't they? I guess they give you promotion, and they have all the connections, and.
But I have my own promotion, my own connections. The center helps me a lot, of course. Sitting where I sit, it's not sitting at home. I have a whole communication team at the office. I have lots of other connections. So, for example, I had normally it's now 2 months after the book has been published. Normally, by now I would do 4 or 5 book talks. I now did about 60 because it's well, the biggest difference was I do it all virtually. I don't have to travel somewhere and do a book, signing, and all the usual stuff. I just do it like this. So I did a whole lot of them. That was the upside. There was also a downside for the timing because normally I got into also the main media, the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, the New York Times, my other books. This one, everybody was just talking about the elections. And now they're all consumed with Trump. So it's just, I couldn't get
too much noise.
Suck all the oxygen out of the media. It just, you could not get an op-ed or an article about anything else. Could not get a book review.
Because I'm like, and you may roll your eyes at this. I'm literally dodging all of everything. Like I used to listen to NPR in the morning on the way to work.
No, I'm the same.
Scrapped it after all the. I think once the Supreme Court Kavanaugh thing started, I was just like, okay, I'm listening to podcasts. That's it. Just podcast specialization, stuff like this, and laser focus.
I'm doing exactly this. I've done exactly this because but
I would think that you would need to, if you're writing books in 5 months, you don't have time for all that.
I stopped even before just because I'm getting mad. But I have one problem. My wife, said so many good things about her, is junkie for news, and she
Same with my wife.
She gets angrier and angrier, and it's just
same with my wife.
Okay.
I tell her, look, I'm not going to tell you what to do because you don't tell your wife what to do.
Yeah, that's a losing proposition.
I'm just like, look, I'm just going to make a suggestion. No news while you're in the bed. Just in the morning, no news. Night before you go to sleep, no news. I'm not going to tell you not to listen to the news or whatever. And and it's a good thing in a way because then she keeps me posted of if there's something new.
But no, she just growls at me now. She gets angry at everything. Tell you one thing that amazes me. Massachusetts is the same size of Israel. Okay. Massachusetts is doing now, they said 30,000 in the first week or something like this, 30,000 vaccinations.
Right.
Israel is doing 150,000 a day. A day. They said that in 2.5 months, they'll be out of COVID. The population will be. How can a fakakta little country like Israel?
And they have 60,000. They have what were you telling me? How much they have enough? They have enough for 7 million people right now, or
right now they have enough for 7 million. In Netanyahu, the prime minister just announced that they're getting more. So it's they're now doing. Now he's using it politically, of course. He's in the doghouse politically, so it helps him. But it helps him. He's now, if you read, if you look online, you see a picture of him sitting next to a blackboard, say, "We got 4.7 million. We're doing it in 1 month," and all of it. But they're doing 2 doses for 2.5 or 2.25 million Israelis in a month. And he said that by 3.5 months or so, the entire population will be vaccinated twice. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, Massachusetts is the same number of people, and we will take until September maybe to do it on a good day.
Really?
Oh yes.
I thought we were all going to get vaccinated by like May.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
keep thinking the good thoughts.
I mean, this starts bringing us back to the supply chain and all.
Yes.
You were telling me before about United States were behind as far as we're definitely not getting it done as efficiently as we should. Um, why is
Yeah.
that, and why is Israel able to do what they're doing? I mean, this is supply chain, right? I mean, that's what it comes
This
down
is
to.
uh, two things, which I got into it, so I got interested in it. Israel, first of all, seems like did not take options on the vaccine like every other country. Every other country was not sure the vaccine will work or not, so they took an option. Israel just bought them. But apparently, Israeli scientists look at the result before the FDA, before anybody said this is very likely to get FDA approval. So
Which
they
one did
just
they buy? Moderna or Pfizer or both?
both.
Mm-hmm.
Both. They like the mRNA, the technology
Mm-hmm.
behind both of them. So they bought. First of all, they got Pfizer. They got 4 million of Pfizer well before the FDA approved. They're in the process of getting another 4 million, another 6 million of Moderna, and now they are in today's news. They said uh, they didn't say which company, but they say agree to give them more. So
Mm-hmm.
and they are. The amazing thing is how fast they do it. So they started with 60,000 a day last Sunday. This Sunday, they did 150,000 a day. They open a lot more clinics in Kupot Cholim. I don't know, it's a local small clinics that they do it. They get to all of them. All the hospitals are doing it. They got several hundred, like 600 or 700 military medics, spread them over the country to help hospitals and nurses. And they're running it now not quite 24/7. They said they are going next week to 24/7, around the clock. But the amazing thing, they had some religious rabbi that were
Sure.
against doing it on the Sabbath, but the government used a rabbinic rule that says that life is more important than anything, and so we're doing it on Sabbath. End of story. And they're running right now. They're running 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, and they said they're going to 24/7 in a week or
Wow.
so. But it's
But don't
just
they have a problem there also with the pandemic because of the religious
huge
Jews?
problem, huge
Right.
problem.
So all the more reason they need to do it.
In fact, they just put a lockdown on the country at the same time. The country is in a lockdown. Now they say it will be a month lockdown, which is tough because they have a second wave.
Right. Well, I mean,
Anyway,
so do
we're
we.
going out of, oh
Yeah,
gosh.
but I mean, you're an expert on this, so, and this is something super important. Um, History is being made right now.
History is
So you
being made.
think you think that United States, though, it's going to take until September for everybody to be vaccinated?
Yes, I think, well, look, nobody knows. We may get
I
our
mean,
act
the ones that
together.
want to be vaccinated, of course.
Of course, we're only talking about those.
The
But
65%.
it will be more. My guess is be about 80%. Once the 35% who are against it realize that people are not glowing in the dark or falling, falling dead in the street, they'll start getting it as well. It by the way happened everywhere. When you start administering the vaccine, the number of people agreeing to take it is going up. It happened in Britain. It happened in France. So it will happen here. The only thing is, and I also don't want to just the information that we have about the United States about the first week. Now Israel was preparing for this way before, which we should have, but we did. Okay,
Yeah.
but the first week is about to have a lot of problems. The information is not flowing the way it should be flowing. People don't know what they're getting until they're actually getting it. And a lot of things have to come together, not only the vaccines, but the everything around giving the little thing like the gauzes. Everything has to come together. And the people who administer it and the people who are getting it all have to come at the same time, at the same place. So it's a scheduling challenge. And I expect that we will get it right after a while. Or
Yeah. Is it seems like um, this this kind of thing is what fascinates you, and this is why you do what you do.
Yeah, it
This,
fascinates me because it's a it's a challenge. Look, it's always been a challenge. If you look at the automotive companies, GM has many plants, 16 assembly plants, and also engine plants and transmission plants. They have to make every plant can make anywhere, depending on the plate, can make thousands of cars every day, and each car will have thousands of parts, and everything has to come in the same place at the same time. So it's kind of the same challenge. You have to coordinate everything and do it at the lowest cost, at the you know exact time when you talk about just in time. In fact, in some sense, the vaccine is easier because nobody is talking about minimizing cost. It's just
yes,
get it done. When you talk about commercial supply chain, you also have to do it at a low cost. Otherwise, it doesn't sell and it's meaningless.
true. But I heard a podcast yesterday, and they were talking. They had the guy from he was in the he Trump appointed him this Moroccan guy. I can't remember what his name was, but he was in charge of the development of all the vaccines, like organizing all the different companies. And he's like, all of the research cost $18 billion. And when you figure like how much one day of like it's like $6 billion to just like of relief every single day.
And
So
not to talking about,
you save a lot of money by spending a lot of money there. Like there's no reason to.
but Noah, it's way beyond. In 1 month, you lose 60,000 people in the United States.
That too, which costs a lot of
60,000.
money.
It's not even the money; it's the
I
life that's
know, but
being
I'm just
lost. So
saying
it's
it
beyond money.
obviously, but
Sure, of course, of course. But
it's one
it's
of the biggest ROI, demonstrations ever.
of course, of course. No, look, the one thing that the Trump administration should be lauded for is the Operation Warp Speed.
Yeah,
Now,
that's what this guy was. This guy was the head of the Operation Warp Speed. Yeah.
okay, this is something that is pretty amazing how they did it. The fact that they seeded, they put a lot of money into it, and at the time you had to put it in March, in April. At the time we didn't know how bad it's going to be. There were not 3,000, 3,500 people dying every day in the United States at that time. Even though there were projection of a second wave, remember Fauci was talking about it. It was hard to fathom that this will be the case, but it was, and the government put all this money. I should say, however, that one should remember that not everything was government money. Um, Pfizer developed it with not a cent from government money. That put
Right.
two
But
billion.
the rest of them
The
took the
rest of them
money.
did. Yes, the rest of them took the money. Pfizer put $2 billion of its own money into this, which is quite amazing too.
The other thing, I know we're totally getting off the subject, but the other thing they said was besides Pfizer, they wanted several companies to do it who
Yes,
this was going to make or break the company. Pfizer, if it didn't work, it didn't work. But they wanted a few small companies
yes,
where
like
it was
Moderna.
life or death.
Moderna.
Yeah,
Moderna could not have done it without government support. I know Moderna headquarters is about 300 yards from my office. I mean, it's right here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's a small company, relatively speaking, for this giant like Pfizer, or Johnson and Johnson, or AstraZeneca, some of the other giants. It's
yeah,
a small startup company basically, and they couldn't do it without government support.
sure,
But they did. They did.
sure. And now now everybody knows about them, and they're,
Oh no,
now
now they're doing fine.
they're going to crush it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about um, what's in the book.
Sure.
Um, you talk about the bullwhip effect in
Oh,
the
yeah.
book, and you said that to me before this interview. You said, yeah, I think the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, that's I'm sure they know some of it already, but explain the bullwhip effect and what you discuss in the book a little bit.
Sure. So let's say you are an OEM who sees, let's say, an increase. So you have your forecast. Forecast is X thousand vehicles per week. Now you see suddenly there's a big, uptick. You don't understand, you don't know why, but you immediately you you order something from tier 1, who order something from tier 2, order more parts, more stuff, more. But something else happening. Let's, for example, assume that tier 1 sees a 20% uptick in the number of parts that they are now being ordered. They first of all they have to take it some of them out of inventory, and then they do something else. They say, well, it's 20% up. Maybe the following week will also do 20% up. They'll order more than 20% from their tier 2, who is tier 1 to them, because they need to fulfill their inventory and add 20%. So what happens is orders oscillate and go higher and higher as you go up in the supply chain. The opposite happens if people stop buying. People stop buying, suddenly you are. So let's say it's 50% down, which by the way happened in this
Sure.
pandemic for many people. So let's say,
70% down, some people told me. Yeah.
of course. So let's say 1 week is boom, 50% down. You are now tier 1. You are stuck with a lot of inventory. You are ordering 75% down. And then the other guy in tier 3 orders nothing because they're stuck with so much inventory they have to work through. So what we see is that the changes in orders in inventory are oscillating higher and higher as you go upstream in the supply chain. So the question is, what can you do about it if you are a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, whatever? You're deep tiers in the supply chain. The only thing that you can do is make sure that you listen to the final consumer, because that's the only signal. Signal is being distorted through the supply chain. But if you always keep an eye on the final consumer, example, make your tier 2, tier 3 automotive suppliers, you should have favorite several dealership around the country and watch them and be in touch with them and know how much they are selling of the product that your parts get into. Because then you see a signal even before or at the same time that the OEM gets the signal. So you're not overreacting, up or down. And furthermore, we saw there were many cases documented on the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, that when we came out of it, people cut down so much that they missed the market when it was going up.
Sure.
So you don't overreact up or down, and that's how you can deal with it. I mean, it's no fun, but you can deal with it.
Right. Right. And that's again happening in the pandemic, and people are
Of course,
wondering how much do they want to, how much vaccine do they want to make, how much space in hospitals do they want to create. And
it's everything. Of course.
um you talk in the book a bit about um people selling produce and the supply chain, and you said people like literally like skipped a few steps,
Oh
correct?
yes. So I talk in my book quite a bit about the food supply chain from 2 points of view. First of all, I claim that a lot of it was created by the media. It was not their finest hour. The media became totally hysterical. There's no food, a shortage of eggs, shortage of meat, shortage of this. Come on. There was sometimes for a week shortage of some cut of meat. You could get others. You couldn't get meat. You
I
couldn't
know.
get chicken. It was not. But if you listen to the media, the skies are falling. At the same time, the food supply chain went to unbelievable changes. From one day to the next, all restaurants, all institutions closed. So all the food that was going in large quantities on, you know, pallet loads to restaurant, to institution was gone. At the same time, what was happening with supermarkets, first of all, you couldn't change the machinery that does that supplies institution to supply supermarkets, because you have to supply in, you know, half a pound packages, a pound packages with all the information on them, with calories and how much sugar and how much fat and all it. Well, you don't have the machinery to do it. So it's and it's illegal not to do it. So you have to supply this information. So and something else happened. At the same time, people dramatically reduced the consumption of fresh produce, and people at home, consumers more cans, food that stays a long time, and more comfort food, pasta, bread. A lot of it went through the roof. So everything changed. It changed. Half your market changed.
To me, that
completely.
seems psychological, though, with the cans and everybody's.
Of course.
They think that
But
it's World War II's coming.
no,
Or
it's not
Korean.
psychological. It's responding to the media. It's the media that made the situation so much worse. The media also, when supermarkets try to control it and say, okay, you get only 2 cartons of eggs, the media started, my God, supermarkets are now restricting you. You have to buy more. Not understanding, you know, what's the cause and what's the effect. I mean, the fact the supermarket did the right thing. In fact, let's talk about one thing that actually happened. Toilet paper. Toilet paper started in Taiwan. When Taiwan, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a rumor that the same raw material that's used for masks is also used for toilet paper. People panic. They say, oh, everybody will start making masks. There'll be no toilet paper. Started buying. The government immediately put restriction on this. Say every supermarket can sell only so much, you know, per visit per week. And there was no issue in Taiwan, but it went throughout the world. And people who did not put restrictions, you know, we had the problem that we had. So that for a while it was difficult to get toilet paper.
Yeah.
But it was all a manufactured crisis. It was not a real crisis. So
this brings me to China a bit. You've talked a lot about China, and you say that they've really gotten their stuff together now, as far as
look. Yes, I'm the last
their
person.
economies are up and their
Yes.
companies are up and running.
Yes, I am not, of course. Nobody who lives in the West wants to live in China. It's a repressive, ridiculous regime. And they, of course, they're now jailing journalists who reported that about the Wuhan disaster and about what happened with the pandemic. But through unbelievably autocratic measures, they actually closed transportation, they closed housing development, they closed Wuhan. At one point, there were 750 million Chinese under quarantine, basically, or under house restrictions. Now, what happened is it killed the pandemic. I know it firsthand, and I don't believe the Chinese media at all, but we have a center in China. And I talk to these people once a week, once every other week, and they are now going to restaurant, they're going to movie, they're going to soccer matches.
So it's not that their vaccine. We don't know if their vaccine is really any good or not.
No.
It was the social distancing and the
Absolutely. And up to now, the unbelievable testing and tracking and tracing. Now, of course, you live in China, you are always tracked. You're always face tracked. Your phone is tracked all the time. So in that sense, makes it a lot easier to find out the minute that you are testing positive, it's very easy to find out who else you were in contact with
Right.
and all that. So, uh, finding other clusters, if they exist, or warning people to stay home is relatively easy. And they do it. They still do it.
Right. But as far as the companies, the government gave a lot of tax breaks and
Especially, it's really interesting. We talk about the supply chain. The government, the Chinese government understands supply chain. And just when the pandemic started, they gave a lot of help to second and third tier companies, to smaller companies, because they figured that those companies are in existential danger. So they, in fact, they can do it only in China. They ask, quote unquote, ask banks, all state controlled banks, to lend with basically free, no interest rate. And they and give loans, you know, to whoever is asked, as long as they fit the criteria of small and medium manufacturer, in a tier 2, 3, 4 in the supply chain. So they understood it and they helped immediately.
isn't that similar to what we did with the
Not quite.
PPP?
Not quite. A lot of what we did, unlike, it's more similar to what Europe did. Even it's not even similar. Europe supported the big corporations because big corporations have many workers, and they supported. They even Germany and Holland changed the rules and supply unemployment to people who are 50% employed. They paid the other 50% only partial unemployment. They supported the company to keep the people working. In the United States, what we did mostly, the bulk of what we did, is to give money to individuals, not so much to companies. Now, of course, we help companies as well, but a lot of what we did is give money to individuals, a lot more than Europe.
What do you mean
Europe
to individual? Oh, you're just saying people, citizens.
to
Yeah.
citizens through unemployment, through the stimulus we gave. Now, let me say something that at the end of the day, it's not clear who is right in the following sense. In Europe, there will be a lot of companies that should not be up anymore. They were badly run, and now with government support, they'll continue running as zombies, just like in China. In the US, there's a lot more, uh,
Sink or swim.
destructive, a lot more, positive destruction in the
Yeah.
fact that the companies will go out of business. New companies will come. The only problem is that, but that's why we try to support the people when it's done right. Right now, it's not done quite right because it creates a lot of misery. A lot of people are losing jobs, losing homes, losing that's, and
Because
and
that's
and
that
we
I
need to
always
give them a lot more help.
right. So I just thought of the PPP and I've figured that, but you're saying um Europe, it was a lot more
Oh, no
for the
comparison.
companies than
No
here.
comparison. Absolutely. Europe basically helped companies. They didn't so much as help people directly. I mean, indirectly, of course, you help them keep their jobs. So you help
Right.
keep companies going. But you don't have this creative destruction that does happen in the United States. And it's a significant, personal um, problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So what um the book is documenting what happened, um and did everything, looking back, did everything kind of go as it should have according to your models? Like you look at it
Oh,
and
God. No.
so what were you
No.
most shocked about as far as how this, the turn of events with the supply chain?
Okay. The one item that worked miserably was the medical supplies and PPEs, personal protective equipment. The fact that the hospital worker had to work without the right mask, without the right gown, without the right gloves, That's even if they had all the medical supplies, but this one was the worst. And in the book, I actually suggest how to solve it, how to make sure, because there'll be more pandemics. And the question is how to deal with it in the future. So I actually suggested 3 ways of doing it, aside from some industries. The government is trying to move some industries back to the US. Not sure that this will work or this will even advisable. But, and we can talk more about it, but we used to have a strategic inventory of medical supplies and PPEs. This started during the Clinton administration, was built significantly during the Bush administration, was completely withered away during the Obama administration, and Trump didn't even know that it's there, I guess. But we got to the point where we had no national inventory. So the first thing is to start a national inventory. We don't need it forever. We need to cover about 3 or 4 months because industries adjust. We saw it with ventilator. We saw it with masks. We saw it with many other
You need
items.
something while they're adjusting to fill in the
Exactly. You need
cracks.
to cover the adjustment period. That's one. Second, you need hospital. So this should be modeled after the strategic petroleum reserve. Just like we had a strategic petroleum reserve, we should have a strategic, medical supply reserve. Second, just like after the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, we did stress tests for bank. We need to do stress tests for hospitals. As the part of the license to operate, they need to keep, let's say, 1 month worth of inventory that can cover them no matter what. So they'll be, before the country gets organized, they get something. The last thing, also modeling after another, or after something else, is what we also lack is enough people, enough nurses, enough, enough technicians. So I said, in my book, I suggest that modeling after the Army National Reserve, we'll have a medical national reserve. People who come and, once one weekend a month, come and help in hospitals. Every year, do 3 weeks in to get trained on new stuff. I'm not saying these are going to be brain surgeons, but they can release a lot of more experienced nurses and more experienced, technicians to do more important things. And by the way, you can train somebody to operate a ventilator in days. It's not that complicated. So, but you need people who will be doing all the time and get. So anyway, that's so modeling after existing, whether it's the National Petroleum, whether it's Stress Reserve Bank, whether the Army National Reserve, have a system that can help us, that can protect us against something like this happen again, because almost everything is adjusted. But this was a disaster.
Yeah, that's an interesting model. Is that stem back, do you think, to your Israeli roots of like soldiers, having to, if people are in the reserves, right, for a long time, where they have to go back and.
Yeah, I was particular because I used to fly airplane for the Israeli Air Force.
Oh,
So
wow.
I used to go once a week to to fly because you have to keep up your skill, and then once a year for 3 weeks. Um, yeah, in Israel everybody is on the national reserve basically. The Israeli military is actually small, but the fact that the whole country is can get mobilized, you get a relatively big for the size of the country military, even though it's also, of course, a huge economic drain when you have to wars economic drain anyway, but just the fact that everybody is not working, but in the military, not everybody, of course, a lot of people are staying, but there are essential people who have to stay anyway. So
what advice do you have for tier 3, tier 2 manufacturers for the next time something like this comes along, or to just prevent
sure
prevent them from getting killed in a pandemic? I mean, I know I read in your book you compared. It's like one thing I really thought was very profound when you said the pandemic kind of had the effect on people the same as it had on companies. If you were
Yes,
already weak, then you were quite susceptible. If you were a smoker, you
exactly,
better quit smoking.
exactly.
Um,
And for companies, it's basically making sure that they are not too leveraged, that they are
mm,
not in a situation when you are so leveraged that something small can knock you off the pedestal. It's great. It's a lot of things. It's relationship with banks. It's relationship with larger companies. It's making sure. It's basically, you know, business 101. It's not. I'm sure your listeners are very well versed in all of this, because this is uh, your listeners are kind of the backbone of manufacturing
yeah,
in the United States. The small manufacturer who make everything, so who make all the items, and but other things, being part of national association, because a small manufacturer of 500 people cannot influence policy, but being part of and I'm sure many of your listeners are, being part of a manufacturing association, being able to have a voice in Washington about policies that affect everybody. But it's not always that the big OEM have the same ideas about what should be done like the small manufacturer. And
absolutely.
we have to protect, as a country, we have to protect it. And it's really unfortunate that the big companies can have their lobbyists and can, you know, politicians will listen to them. But some of these big companies, it's amazing to me. Some of the companies are full of smart people, don't understand their dependence on a lot of the small tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 manufacturer in the United States. Let me go back and explain it
That's
another way.
interesting. That yeah, I mean, I could see that they don't understand. They're just
I,
everybody's so self-absorbed.
let, let me explain something. And go on, I talked the book a lot about China. So let me talk about another aspect of China. People want to attract, manufacturing out of China. They think manufacturing will leave China. It's not going to happen. And the reason that it's not going to happen is because politicians don't understand that it's not the OEM who put the label on the product. It's not the final assembly who put made in China on the product. It can be now made in Mexico, made in the US. That's not it. All the value addition, all the jobs are in the huge ecosystem of supplier and their supplier and their supplier and their supplier. China has this huge ecosystem of good manufacturer, good supplier, and it's hard to extricate the whole ecosystem. They take decades to build and billions of dollars. You cannot extricate this. So we have to keep what we have in the United States. I mean, because these are the people, it's the ecosystem that's the important thing, not who puts the final label on the. I don't care if all this supplier here will help make BMW cars in Germany even. That's fine. But I want all the parts to be made here, all the knowledge, all the innovation about parts to be made here in the United States.
Yeah. And you don't think reshoring is happening, or as far as you've seen?
I don't, I
And
should
is
say,
that because of the infrastructure? Because it
yes,
it's
bec-
so
because
ingrained over there, so it's really hard to.
people will do it, what I said, for show, meaning they may move the final assembly to, Vietnam. So the labels say made in Vietnam, but all the value was made in China. So it's not going to be a big deal at all. I don't see reshoring.
No, but I mean
It's
reshoring here in the United States.
not going to happen. As I say, when everything's said and done, a lot more said than done. It's still complicated with all the regulatory process in the United States or in Europe, for the matter. Uh, you know what? Anybody who was bemoaning the United States should look at the problem that Elon Musk is having in building a Tesla factory in Germany, just in 2 days.
Elon Musk, you said?
Yes, he's having huge problems now. They stop his plant because there's some animal, I don't even remember, some little animal that is, something is going to happen to him. Now he wants to build the biggest Tesla plant in the world in Germany. So, but now he's being stopped, he's being sued, it's the usual stories. It's not only the United States. Happens
Sure.
in other countries. And of course, the auto industry is up in arms because it brings thousands of jobs, but there's some green little thing that crawl. I don't know what it is even.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Just a couple other questions.
And by the way, let me just
Yeah.
one of the downside of getting the Biden administration is that we can get a lot more of this. If we get a Green New Deal and all those, it will be more difficult to do business in the United States.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. One of my final questions was,
Sure.
if you had any advice for Mr. Biden coming in.
Yeah, advice that will make all. I live in the People Republic of Cambridge, as you know, the PRC, right? So so we have a lot of people who are out there on the left, beyond the left, kind of
Mm-hmm.
2 miles left of Stalin, out there. So please get it out. But the problem is, and I was not a Trump supporter, but you have to build on the Trump successes. There is no reason to
Right.
try because it was Trump to go totally against it.
Absolutely.
And then
Don't have sour grapes just because he
don't
did.
have
Yeah.
exactly. Trump did a lot of bad things, but he did a lot of good things. So try to build on the good things that he did, on the successes. Let me give you one thing as an Israeli. John Kerry said,
I like how Israelis, you guys you keep it real.
no, because John Kerry said, no Arab country will ever do business with Israel before the Palestinian problem is solved. Lo and behold, in the last few months, 3 Arab countries and others are doing it under the table, open relationship with Israel. I mean, so just try to build on it. And of course, it's politics, but going about
That's
regulatory,
fine. We can talk about whatever.
yeah, but the regulatory process is really what's important. Some regulation really did not make any sense. So don't try to reinsert them just because Trump did it, and now we must undo everything that Trump did.
Yeah.
That should be a ridiculous approach. Try
And it
to,
will happen.
of course, it will happen, but I'm hoping that one of Biden said himself as a centrist, he can work across the aisle. He can get himself. You ask what's the advice that I give Biden. So he can get himself a lot of brownie points by acknowledging this, by saying this is something that Trump did and it's right, and we are going to build on this. We're not going to just destroy everything just because it was Trump. This is one way to reach across the aisle, to show that you are governing for all people, which is professing to do.
And your guess is as good as mine whether he's going to do that or not.
No, he's not.
He's going to just tear it all down and
tear it all down just on principle, because that will something that will make the Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez crowd happy. And but What he doesn't understand is, you ask me what I'm doing. They'll never be happy. No matter what he does, they'll never be happy. Because to get legislation, he'll have to get some Republican to support it. And they will never be happy with this. Anything that's compromised, they will never be happy. So
yeah, same on both sides.
Absolutely same on both sides. There's a right wing that will never be happy with anything that makes sense. For example, with that's
a whole nother can of worms.
yeah.
What's something interesting that you learned last week?
Last week I was in the middle of trying to understand why Israel did so well. That's honestly, I spent all
That
of
is a
last week
fascinating thing to have learned.
on phone calls and trying to get the Ministry of Health and some of the insurance companies still trying to get in touch. I was talking to the vice general manager or deputy general manager of the Ministry of Health, and it's a woman who told me, I can give you about 20 seconds to talk to you. I'm working 18-hour days and I cannot talk to you. So talk to 20 seconds. It was, hi, how are you? That's about it. She just didn't have time to talk. So yeah. I can understand it. I mean, they are doing this amazing operation and trying to increase. And then it's, so that's what I was doing last week.
That is a really interesting thing. And you are 72.
Every day, at least this year.
And if you wanted, you could go over there and get a vaccine ASAP.
No, I cannot. Actually, I cannot. Even though I have an Israeli passport as well as American, I cannot, because because I'm not a resident. Israel has one of the things that makes it work. They have a statewide registry of all citizens in the healthcare system, because healthcare is a national. In Israel, healthcare is a right. It's not. It's a right for every citizen, and it's not only right. You have to pay for it. I mean, they deduct from your salary, deduct from if you are self-employed, if you are anything, you have to pay. So everybody pays. So everybody's in it automatically. They don't have to do anything. In fact, even if they don't want, they're deducted and they're part of this registry. I'm not part of it.
I see.
So I don't know how. And the way it works is that you call a central number or get online, and they give you immediately an appointment. And then you have to come to a certain place, a certain time, you get the vaccine. 3 weeks later, you come to the same place, you get the next shot. I'm not in the system. I talked to my wife and said, will we, try to use, relay,
Is she Israeli as well?
Oh, yes. We met in the military. And it's well, half the Israeli couples met in the military. What happens when you throw 18-year-old men and women together away from home? Guess what? so because women also serve. So it's then the problem is I'm not crazy about flying to Israel. The idea of going to Logan Airport and then JFK and then Tel Aviv Airport.
No, you'll catch it by the time you get there.
That's the problem. That's the problem. It's a long flight, so people have to eat. People have to go to the bathroom. It's a 12-hour flight, so it's or 10 hours going this direction. So it's even if I could get it, which I cannot at this point, I don't know if I would go and fly or to 3 airports to get to Israel.
One more question. What's your next book?
It's funny that you ask. I tried immediately when I finished the first book in August. I tried to write a book about the vaccines actually, but I could not get people to talk to me. I know people in Johnson & Johnson, in Moderna, in lots of companies, and couldn't get people to talk to them. They all said, if people are friends,
it's too secretive.
They're afraid of liability. They're afraid of they'll say something, they'll promise something, it's not going to be the same, and all this. And They're afraid that people will sue them. For example, let me give you one different thing. We talked about it between Israel and the United States. In the United States, before I get the vaccine, I have to fill a whole form that I agree not to sue, that I agree to. In Israel, they said nothing. You show up, it means you agree. You don't agree, don't show up. And that's it. And you don't even talk about it. The fact that you show up to get the vaccine means that you agreed. That's it. And you cannot sue, you cannot do anything. You don't want to do it, don't show up. It's so reasonable and just, because you spend another 5 minutes in line, it means that there are so many more people. So you cannot do as high a number as you need to do, because you spend a long time talking to people too much and getting all this form and all this.
Sure, and all the Israelis will get angry if they have to wait too long. And
you can't get Israelis to wait too long. You know this. It's they'll come cut out of line immediately. So it's even though this is very organized, because you have to, the vaccine, it's part of the healthcare system, the national healthcare system. So you get the appointment, you go there, and you get it. My sister got it. My brother got it already. And if they say it takes, 2 minutes to get in, then they told them to wait 15 minutes afterwards in the area to see if they get a reaction. They said that 99% the reaction starts immediately if you are sensitive to this. So they told them not to leave the place when you get the vaccine, because there are doctors there. To stay 15 minutes. If 15 minutes you feel fine, just go home. And if not, go right back in and see a doctor.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Yossi. This was so much fun.
Yeah. No problem. No problem. Nice talking to you. Nice getting to know you.
Absolutely. I'm assuming after this, you're going to go start writing another book or something. And
yeah, what I'm doing, I'm going back to the book that I stopped midway, which of course is very frustrating to get back to what I was thinking before and all this. But I started already working on the book that I stopped working in March about. It's a book about, as I say, innovation. Yeah. But what I do, I want to see which is autonomous vehicles, robotics, blockchain, sensors, what out of this will be something that will change significantly supply chain, and what will end up as a niche, just application. I think you're old enough to realize what happened during RFID. We said RFID is going to change everything. The whole supply chain is going to change. It became a niche application. It's not going to change everything.
That's where you're at the store and you have the barcode and you can just...
No. The barcode is the competitor to RFID. That's why RFID didn't work. RFID means that you have basically in factories, in warehouses, you have it's like a barcode, but it's an electronic barcode that you can read from. You don't need to put a reader next to it. You can read it from distances. So everything that goes in the warehouse, you know about all the time, for example.
You don't need a phone to
No. And it didn't work. It still doesn't work very well, but it works for some application. So it's but no, the point is, once every so often we get a new innovation. People say, it will change everything forever.
You think blockchain is going to change everything?
No, of course not. But it's no.
I did an interview with a guy about blockchain and the supply chain, and
and he said it's going to change everything. Unless I don't know who you did, but if it's a
guy named Jim Reganor.
No. I'm just asking, if he's a supplier, then it will change everything. If he's a consumer of blockchain, he knows reality. But it's so I don't know the guy. I don't talk about him. But what happened is, it's a very slow technology for now. Think about, if you know how it works. It works on multiple computers. Many computers have to verify a transaction, which means it has to replicate it. It's just slow. When you do commercial application, you have to do millions a second. This can do about a few thousand at best. It's not ready for prime time, and it's not clear that the technology itself will have a way to get out of its own way. But tell you one thing that I know a lot of companies who did a lot of work in this, call it blockchain. And what we did was basically fix up the network, and because they call it blockchain, they could get money from the board to do it. Very little to do with blockchain.
So like the medical
just
stuff, like with the portal, and they say it's run on blockchain. And
well, I'm not familiar with this, but I'm talking about distributed processing in general. So people build distributed processing application, which always existed, and did it with blockchain. Now, you can do stuff with blockchain. You can get, when you get an MIT degree now, you get it with, but it's a gimmick. You get it with a blockchain on your phone. But why do you need it? All this security? Because you want to show it to somebody, okay? But you can also dial into and put a password into the central MIT system and see your degree and your grades and everything. But we now do something with blockchain, and the students are gaga about it. So it's, but it does nothing. So until we find out, and there may be, I'm not saying there are applications when the volume is not very high, relatively speaking, and security is paramount, like medical supplies, like some items like this, when it's worth investing in this, and you don't need,
maybe, or
and you don't need speed. The military probably,
aerospace,
and you don't need the speed, and the but
I thought the whole point was the speed.
No. You don't need the speed. You cannot do millions of transactions a second like you do in real big supply chains. It just doesn't do it. So,
okay.
but look, there could be. It's very hard to bet against technology. We had in 1970 a professor at MIT was the first one that developed the mRNA. Nobody knew what it's for. He got
in
the
1970.
1970. He got the Nobel Prize for it. It's Phil Sharp. He got the Nobel. He's a Nobel laureate. He got the Nobel Prize for it. It was totally a theoretical development.
And then that
50 years later, we got the mRNA vaccine that was done in 7 or 8 months. So
from
you don't know
what was the company?
No, the mRNA vaccine is the technology behind both Pfizer and Moderna.
Right. No, but
the company, there was no company. Phil Sharp was the Nobel laureate who in the early 70s, I don't know, 1970 or maybe between 70 and 75, uncovered the technology that now we call mRNA. It was different names and all this, but it basically was the first one. And as I say, he got the Nobel Prize for this. So people even then recognize it's a big deal. But he got the Nobel Prize in the late 80s. People, you get it after a while, people look back at it. But
interesting.
But so it's very hard to bet against technology because you can have things that are really unexpected.
You don't know which is going to be the one.
Yeah, you don't. People that think that are unexpected. So we'll see.